Welcome to the Unmet Powercast, the place to be when you get serious about making big changes and accelerating growth in your life and in your relationships. Finally create the life you've always wanted, living life on your own terms. Learn how to take your fear and turn it into powerful choices that will create sustained change. Now your host, Mary Baker.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Unmet Powercast, the place to come to get what you need to move yourself forward. Hey, it's Mary Baker and welcome to episode 231, Roots of Self, Unmet Childhood Needs and the Impact on Self-Concept. Well, welcome back as we finish out this month talking about the importance of getting needs met, identifying what we need, validating our needs, and then putting our needs out there in healthy ways, which includes, like we talked about last week, setting boundaries, because that goes hand in hand with honoring what we need. Well, this week I want to revisit and kind of cement the importance of needs and how they actually tie into our self-concept, and I think impact every area of our life. But before we do, I want to remind you that the course is live. And if you like what we're talking about today, you can take it so much deeper and so much further in my online system that I've designed. Speaking of getting needs met, give the gift of change to yourself and grab the course. Go in the show notes, hit the link. It'll walk you right through it before prices go up. And make sure you sign up for the group coaching option because that gives you all the support and the mirroring, and the challenge that you need to really grow. Okay, so let's talk about how early experiences shape our self-concept, as we do in many different ways on this show. But we want to really look at how do needs play a part, specifically unmet needs. So one of the things that happens when we don't get our needs met when we're kids is that early experiences lay the foundation for our core beliefs, especially the ones about ourselves. So whether we received love, validation, or faced challenges during childhood, that really shaped how we see our worthiness, our capabilities, and our place in the world. I know that sounds heavy, but that's true. And it creates the blueprint for our relationships. You know, the relationships we have with our caregivers and our siblings in our very early years serve as blueprints for future relationships. Those are our templates. So if we experience trust, basic security, and support, not perfectly, but good enough, we're obviously going to make more positive connections later in life. Conversely, if those early relationships were strained, it might impact our ability to trust and connect with others. And that has a big impact on our emotional well-being. So early experiences, we know, play a crucial role in shaping our emotional landscape. So obviously, positive experiences create emotional resilience, while negative ones may give rise to emotional challenges. And there is a continuum from benign things to trauma and everything in between. But understanding these early emotional imprints can make us navigate our emotions more consciously, I think, and take ownership of them. You know, to understand what is a trauma response and what's appropriate. So identity is a big piece that we're getting into today because our sense of identity, I think, is so intricately linked to how we're seen and acknowledged in our early years. Remember, as a kid, you needed the mirrors around you to show you who you were because you were still learning about the world and learning about you. And developmentally, you had to trust those around you to be telling you the truth. Because 10 and under, you were so dependent on their knowledge of you, of the world, how to do things, how to handle things. So whether you were encouraged to express your individuality or maybe face some suppression can significantly influence your self-identity and how authentic you feel in expressing yourself. And you've heard me talk so many times on the show here that if you had to disown or deny or couch what you really felt and what you really thought and what you really needed and what you really needed to know or needed to know how to do, then you had to disown big parts of who you really are at the core. If we have to disown who we really are, there's no way we can show up authentically. You can't. So this all taps into the coping mechanisms that we therefore have to develop to survive. So if we faced adversity, we probably learned that certain ways to protect ourselves emotionally helped us to survive. It maybe helped us to not be hit or yelled at or shamed or ridiculed or questioned or neglected more. Understanding some of these things can help you make more sense of you and what you struggle with, and then how that ties into unmet needs growing up. The other thing that is a part of this is our self-talk. So the way we talk to ourselves, our inner dialogue, is often shaped by the messages we received in childhood. You internalize the critical parent or the positive parent. So positive reinforcement tends to lead to a more supportive and compassionate self-talk because you have no reason to be hard on yourself. While negative experiences can contribute to more critical internal narrative. So again, we take that truth from the outside and we internalize it and use it on ourselves. Truth in quotes there. Things people told you about you or even about themselves and you modeled. If your mom was really shaming when she made a mistake and she was really hard on herself out loud, you modeled it because how else are you going to handle when you screw up? That's where you were learning it. That's why I keep saying our families are our first classrooms where we learned pretty much a lot of everything that we needed to start out in the world. All right, so let's talk about what some of those unmet needs might have been. This is just a quick overview because we've gotten into that more deeply in previous episodes. So if you're not sure if this is your first time diving into emotional needs, I encourage you to listen to previous episodes with needs in the title so that you can explore that more deeply. But let's talk about some of the common ones. Big one is emotional neglect. So there was a lack of emotional responsiveness, lack of support from your caregivers, from your mom, your dad, your uncle, your aunt, your grandparents. Also the absence of affectionate gestures and maybe verbal expressions of love. Maybe you weren't told that you were loved and cherished enough. Maybe that was too vulnerable for your family to do. Maybe they were very guarded and they didn't give hugs very freely, things like that. Maybe you didn't receive comfort when you were little and you fell down and hurt your knee, or when you were scared or upset. Were your feelings validated? So lack of validation, so not receiving acknowledgement or recognition. So this could be for your feelings, for achievements, or even efforts. The other way this shows up is being ignored or dismissed. So you can have your feelings dismissed or minimized at the dinner table, which is very damaging. It's pretty much telling you don't make any sense and your feelings and you don't matter. Then there's the crazy making inconsistency in families where sometimes it's very loving and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's neglectful and it's crazy. It's chaotic. It's inconsistent. So unpredictable or unreliable caregiving. And that can almost be harder for kids growing up because they never know what to expect. Like if they know what to expect, they feel awful, but they feel more secure, if that makes sense. But when there's inconsistency in getting basic needs met, like food and shelter and emotional comfort from your parent or parents because of things happening, either they were just so emotionally immature or mentally ill or addicted or just had hellacious things coming at them where they didn't cope very well, so they couldn't be consistent for you. That's really damaging, and it sets up its own level of PTSD for the kid. An overly critical environment, constant criticism or negative feedback will erode your sense of self-worth as a kid. Maybe there were high expectations without positive reinforcement for things that you tried or accomplished. Maybe you got a B in math and you were horrible at math, but that wasn't good enough. Abandonment or rejection. So when you experience physical or emotional abandonment by caregivers or older siblings or both. Maybe feeling rejected or unloved, leading to a fear of forming connections because of what could happen. I mean, that makes perfect sense. And there's a trauma, right? There's exposure to traumatic events during your childhood. Maybe there was coping with challenging circumstances where you didn't have adequate support. Or maybe your parents didn't. They tried, but they just couldn't glue it together. Parental modeling, we mentioned that earlier. So things you observe. So if you observed negative behavioral patterns in parents, what were you supposed to adopt? I mean, they didn't give you positive role modeling for healthy relationships or how to cope, how to problem solve, how to be frustrated but say, okay, well, we got to fix this. Let's see what we can do to figure this out. Was there a personal responsibility modeled? Did your parents ask for help appropriately from others so that they could problem solve? Or was there a lot of martyring and chaos creating behavior instead? Overprotection or helicopter parenting is another area when there is excessive control and restriction, which really hinders a kid's development of independence. I heard a scientist say the other day that with his kids, he really tried to not thwart creativity and learning, like experiments, like with water and finger paint and things like that. Like, let the kid get messy. Let them splash in the puddle and see what happens. For a lot of kids, there was limited opportunities for self-discovery and decision-making, and that does not bode well for one's self-esteem. Figuring things out for ourselves, making choices, learning about our world, learning about ourselves has a lot to do with our self-confidence. It's how we build it. Maybe you had some comparison and sibling stuff going on. So if you were compared to your siblings or your cousins or your peers, it's awful. It's definitely going to hammer your self-esteem. Maybe you had problematic sibling relationships because if you were hurting, they were hurting. They probably hurt you. They probably weren't very nice oftentimes. There's a lot of shame being projected from kids onto other kids because everyone's fighting for parental love. And there might have been such a lack of it that it was easy for siblings to be really hard on one another. If your big brother really struggled with self-esteem issues, he probably was going to shame you when he was upset. And the problem is that your siblings are your first peers, especially older ones. I mean, they walk on water when you're little and you look up to them and you want to be like them, and their approval is so important, especially if there's a vacuum of parental approval. Oh boy, then that's just like a double whammy. Maybe you had things happen outside the home. Maybe there was some bullying or peer rejection. Maybe in sports or at school or both. Maybe it was really hard for you to form healthy relationships. Maybe you were the poor kid that people laughed at, or the smart one. This is just an overview of typical things, hopefully that can get you thinking as to, wow, where was my childhood? Are there some things I haven't even looked at yet? Because childhood experiences, I think, serve as the cornerstone of construction of our self-concept. It's where that lens gets created where we perceive and define ourselves. From our earliest interactions with our caregivers to all the dynamics in our family unit and beyond, these early years lay the groundwork for beliefs that we formed about our worth, our capabilities, and our place in the world. The relationships, the feedback we received, and the coping mechanisms we formed, they become integral parts of our self-narrative. So understanding and unpacking these things is so important. not getting needs met is a big deal, and it doesn't mean they didn't want to meet them. Perhaps maybe they just didn't meet all of them for you or consistently enough. Again, not perfectly, but consistently enough where it didn't create anxiety for you as to, am I going to have dinner tonight? Am I going to get a hug when I'm sad? Is home going to be safe and stable for the most part? So let's talk about specifically how some of those things we just talked about could impact our self-worth. When there's a lack of validation or acknowledgement, how are you supposed to know who you are and how you are seen as a person? How are you going to know your own value? Because if you're not getting validation or acknowledgement, not a trophy for everything you do, but just appropriate mirroring back, like, wow, look, you worked really hard on that math test and you got a B, good for you. It pays off when you work really hard. Or maybe we love how smart you are. Or we appreciate how wonderful you are to your sister. There's the development of a negative self-image that can happen, obviously, with the constant criticism and or neglect. Oftentimes there's both. You're going to internalize the negative messaging. There's no way you can be spared of that. So then you're going to have this distorted, because it's not true, and unfavorable self-image. That you will carry on through adulthood. I want to stop here for a moment because a lot of people argue with me. Just because you maybe did well academically or career-wise, or you're very talented in an area and you have done well, maybe professionally in that area, doesn't mean you're healed. It just means that that served to meet needs for you of validation and worth. But those things are external. What we're talking about today is your transcendent self-worth, no matter what you're good at or what you suck at or what you screwed up today, kind of worth. Because when there are unmet needs in childhood, you will seek external validation. You're going to need to compensate for the validation you didn't receive then. And then you're going to become more reliant upon other people's opinions, maybe on achievements or both. There's a big fear of rejection. So when there's unmet needs for love and acceptance, that can create a deep-seated fear of rejection, obviously. So you can become really sensitive to perceived slights or subtle criticism, and maybe anticipating rejection in some social setting so that you will maybe avoid the gathering. Maybe you won't put yourself out there. You won't be genuine because you don't want to be rejected, if that makes sense. The other impact is difficulty setting boundaries. So when there's a lack of consistent support or boundaries in childhood, obviously we're going to have a hard time setting them in adulthood. This can come from a fear of asserting your needs and your desires, and it really can feel wrong or aggressive or selfish because becoming a boundary person means a paradigm shift like I talk about here. I think it means becoming a whole different person. It's a big change. You have to look at everything that you believe about boundary work. From growing up maybe in a passive-aggressive home or a home where people did not honor boundaries because they didn't know how. That's a big shift in your mind. There might be a struggle for independence, overprotective parenting or an absence of encouragement for independence. Maybe in a meshed family system can really hinder the development of a strong sense of autonomy. This can make it hard for you to make decisions and take initiative and follow through and finish things. Those of you know what I'm talking about. Making it real by finishing things. That ties in with perfectionism as a coping mechanism. So unmet needs for approval can really drive you towards perfectionism as a way of finally getting the recognition and the affirmation you didn't get. But you know how dangerous this is. You're always going to have anxiety and that fear of inadequacy. It's a lose-lose scenario. Perfectionism is a prison, And the best thing to do is get out. There's impacts on your academic and professional achievements. When you don't have needs met as a kid, it can really influence your motivation and confidence in trying new things and putting yourself out there because you question your worthiness and you don't know how to deal with setbacks and challenges and how to pivot. Then just in essence, a lack of clarity about yourself. You may not know who you are outside of these external expectations, right? So again, going back to childhood, when you did not get the affirmation that what you needed was okay and that you made sense and what you felt made sense and that you deserved comfort and guidance and structure and security and genuine interest in you and belongingness and feeling safe both physically and emotionally, feeling loved, having fun times with your family. I mean, there's so many needs, right? If you did not get these met, how can you know that you were worth getting them met? Because remember, every little kid is egocentric. Everything revolves around them. There's no convincing a 6-year-old that it's not their fault that you can't be there for them. Now, as they get older and they individuate a little bit, they're like, oh no, honey, it's not me. It's mom. Mom can't get it together. Dad can't get it together. But they still carry the wound that why were my needs not important? And that's why you see a lot of angry acting out teenagers, because they're hurting. So how do you break the cycle? Well, you're listening to this podcast, which is a really good step, and you've probably already done some work on this. Wherever you are on that continuum, I want to do a little bit of an exercise here. Those of you who have listened to a lot of the episodes know what we're going to do. If you're new to this, just know that I'm going to read some sentence starters, and I want you to finish with a couple endings that come up for you. Whatever comes up, trust the first thing that comes up, then the second thing, then the third thing. I'll read a few of them, and the rest will be available by downloading the newsletter or in the group. So grab the newsletter or join the group. It's all in the show notes. If you are somewhere where you can write your answers, that's fabulous. But if you're not, don't worry about it. Just pay attention to and trust what comes up immediately when I give you these. Okay, you ready? Number 1. In my early years, I experienced. In my early years, I experienced. Number 2. When it comes to my childhood, I remember. When it comes to my childhood, I remember. Number 3. I've observed that I react strongly when. I've observed that I react strongly when. Number 4. I've realized that I often cope with stress by. I've realized that I often cope with stress by. Okay, so what came up for you? Anything surprise you? If you can, somehow today, write them down if you weren't able to write them just now, because they might be some good guideposts as to where to do some work. And then you can go into the show notes and hit the link to get the rest of them. So these sentence starters can serve as prompts for journaling, any kind of self-reflection you want to do, a discussion with your therapist or your coach or a trusted friend, to really tap into where you might still be struggling, why you might be struggling, and then how to do some healing work around getting needs met. And also, because you can't go back and change what happened then. But what you can do is look at your life today and say, okay, what am I still doing that I did when I was a kid? What did I learn how to do over the years to disown what I needed? And I've probably put relationships around me where people may not be pulling me aside in a loving way and saying, are you okay? Have you had some rest? I mean, you're doing too much here. Or that I see you and I see that you're hurting, or I'm happy for you and look at you, look how hard you've worked to get here kind of thing. So that just compounds it, because then we don't have people around us who are doing the healthy thing and acknowledging what we need. If you do have some people in your life that you probably didn't choose, maybe people that you work for or work with, or maybe a neighbor, pay attention to when people notice what you need. So how do you work on this? One of the things we talk about here on the show is nurturing your inner child the best you can. If you have a picture, that's great, but just picture yourself right now as a little kid in your mind, and just trust whatever image comes up is the one you're supposed to see. And then just try to pull up that image a couple times a day, if you can, and then see your child self and just imagine or meditate on letting him or her know that you get it, that you understand now, that you understand that they deserved better, and that their needs mattered whether they were met or not, and that you're going to get better today at acknowledging what you need, so you stop the cycle. So first you acknowledge that it wasn't okay, then you reparent yourself in one sense where you do differently today. So how do you do this? As you go through your day, you just take a moment, a couple times during the day, and just stop and notice. Notice how you're doing, notice how you're feeling, what's going on around you. Have you been taking care of yourself? This is where you bring in self-compassion and no self-blame. It's good to own things, but do it with compassion. Do it with neutrality. Say, look at that. I skipped lunch today. Okay, well, I got really busy. There was a crisis that came up, so that makes sense. Okay, but let me take some time now to eat. Okay, you see how I did that? It's like you acknowledged it. You didn't say, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't let myself eat lunch. No, don't do that. There is a reason. You can qualify it. It was acute, not chronic. You can change things going forward if you want to. And you can fix it. You can eat something now. Do little things for yourself. This matters. Take a 10-minute break. Take 15 minutes to plan the day a little better so you don't feel so frazzled. With the holidays coming up, I'm sure you're already feeling that way. Ask for help with little things. Things to help you get organized, bring the groceries in, make a phone call for you, help you do whatever you need. Little things matter. Take the stairs. Say no to little things via text. Don't put anything else on your plate today. Make your bed. Stop working on time-ish, or close to the time. Eat something a little healthier today. These may seem like little things and seem insignificant, but they're really not. Here's why. They compound, they add up. We knew this now. We've heard this enough. There's enough research out there. But I think they're also very symbolic as much as they are real. Like the benefits of rest are real, right? Physiologically and mentally and emotionally for you. But so is the idea that you gave yourself the opportunity to rest, that you set boundaries around things to at least get to bed on time and tried some better sleep hygiene. Or maybe you peeled back some of the to-dos on your list and you simplified and you're feeling less stressed. Everything that you do or don't do adds up in one direction or another of taking care of yourself or not. But we don't have to do the grand gestures, and sometimes we just can't. If you're a busy working parent, you have to be realistic. You're going to grab time when you can. But even if you don't think it's even possible to take a day off or take a nap or get a massage or clean out the garage before Christmas, it's okay. Just acknowledging, I think, what you need is so important. Then you can be more intentional going forward as the days go by to honor what you need better than you did yesterday. So it can be a process. You can be in progress. It can wax and wane. We can have days better than others, and that's still okay. It's the on average that I want you to think about in terms of taking care of yourself. Because the more you take care of yourself, the better you feel. You know this. Think back to times in the recent past where you did. You got a day off. You got a break. You went for a walk. You organized things. You met with friends to hang out. You received a hug. You gave a hug. All the little things matter and they add up. So even if you listened today or you already knew that a lot of your needs went unmet, you can work on reparenting today. You can make it different today. And the more that you do, the better. And you don't have to do it perfectly. You just have to try. But every time you tell yourself, I need a break, I need a hug, I need some more money, I need rest, I need lunch, you're telling yourself that you matter and that your needs matter. And that's all that matters. So today we looked into the profound impact of unmet childhood needs on our self-esteem and our identity. I think our well-being overall. We talked about the various ways in which early experiences like emotional neglect, lack of validation, inconsistent support can really shape the core of who we are, whether we felt safe or not. So we looked at specific repercussions like impacts on our self-worth, developing a negative self-image, looking for our worth out there outside of ourselves. From the fear of rejection to struggles with setting boundaries and forming healthy relationships, we looked at how we still might be doing some of these things today. Then finally, we looked at ways to get back in touch with ourselves and slowly but surely honor and begin to get needs met to show ourselves what we really truly are. And that is worthy, because we all are. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Make sure you hit the show notes and get the newsletter or join the group so you can get the rest of the exercise and so you can reach out and get support and support others in the group. Don't forget to hit the link for the course and check that out. Maybe you can gift it to someone you love or maybe even to yourself. All right, so pay it forward, keep focusing on you, and I'll see you next time.
We hope you took away some useful insights and tools you can begin using right away. If you did, please leave a positive review and share on your social media. Because could you imagine if everyone in your life really got it together? Remember, own it now so you can really own it later.